By the end of this video, you will learn how to redesign Notion navigation component using Figma Auto Layout in 10 easy steps. Step 1. For this project, we are going to first visit the starter page, and the first section that we are going to recreate is the navigation bar. As you can see, if I hide everything, here on the top side we have a nav bar that has some links. We have the hero section that has 2 text. We have our testimonials. We have another section that is basically a toggle. And finally, we have 4 cards. If we take a look at the right hand side here, we see that we have a color palette that we can use from to basically recreate everything that we see here on the screen. Step 2. So if I toggle back the UI, the first thing we need to do is basically copy this navigation bar and the colors to another page. So let's just go ahead and do that. I would first click on the navigation, Command and C to copy, visit another page, rename this to components, and then I would paste that here. In order for me to create a separation between these two, I can create another page and add 3 dashes, and if I press return on my keyboard, it creates a divider between them. So I can click and drag this. A divider is basically created between them. Also, what I need to do for my navigation is bringing the logo and also creating some color styles, because if I click outside here, you see we don't have any color styles to choose from. So I'll go back to the starter page, click on the Notion logo, copy this, go to the components page, paste that here as well, and then finally I will go to the starter page, copy the colors and go back to the components page and then paste them here as well. Step 3. So the first thing we need to do is basically recreate colors out of these color palette that we have. What you can do is basically rename them one by one and create color styles, which means you can click on this color, and then if you go ahead and visit the fill section, you can highlight over that 4 dots, select that, click plus, and then here we have the style. And then in this example, we are going to use this for our primary color. So what I can do is rename this to primary, and usually I would rename this based on the lightness, which means if I click on the fill, here we have a lightness of 5. So I would rename this after the /5. And then once I'm done, I would create. Step 4. And as soon as I click create, here you see on the right hand side we have primary, and then if I click, you see we have the lightness of 5 added. The reason Figma created a folder is because we added the /. So if I have to repeat this for every single one of them, clicking, going to the fill section, clicking plus, and renaming it that way, it might be time consuming. So you can use a plugin to actually generate all of that. And then once you generate the styles, you can actually rename them one by one. This way you can save a couple of clicks by going and applying styles one at a time. So if I click outside and basically delete this, once I delete everything, all I have to do is basically click on my colors, open my layer panel, and then as you can see, they have generic names. So what I can do is I can rename them one by one from the layer panel and then use the plugin to generate the colors. So the way I would categorize them, I would basically select both of these and categorize them as primary. So I would hold Command and R to rename both of them as bulk, and then just type primary and give it a /. By doing that, it would rename both of them as bulk. So I'll click rename, and then I will click on the first one, double click on that, and then just give it a 5. Click on the other one, double click on that. I would give it 94, because if I click on the fill here, you see that the lightness value is 94. So I would basically rename this primary color to 94 as well. So I would highlight both of these as well. Command and R, rename this to secondary and add a /. And then I would click on the first one. And as you can see, if I click on the fill, it is 53 in terms of the lightness. So what you can do is round this up to 50. So here on the secondary, I would just go with 50. If I select the other one, on the HSL value, it is actually being renamed to 93. So we can round this up to 94. And then we have another color here. I would just rename this to tertiary, and then I would give it a /. And then if I go ahead and select the fill, here we see that the lightness is 43. So I would just basically round this to 40. And then finally, this is a white color. And then if I click on the fill, white is always 100% in terms of lightness, which means I would just double click, just give it a gray color, and then /, and just give it 100. Step 5. So if I take a look at the left hand side, this is how we renamed our colors. And what we have to do is select all of them, Command and /, and then run a command called generate styles. If you don't see this command, you have to run this plugin first. And the way you would do that is you would go to the plugins, you would search for the plugin called Styler, and then here, this is the plugin that I use. You can click on the 3 dots, view detail, and then if you click run, it gives you a couple of options. So what you can do is run the generate style command. As soon as you run this and you save this to your plugins, next time you can just basically use Command and / and search for generate style, and it would automatically appear for you. So you don't need to click multiple times to get to that. So here I would click on generate style, and here we have 7 styles generated. If I click outside, you see all of the styles are generated for us automatically. So that would save us a ton of time. Instead of us clicking on one of them one by one and renaming them and creating a style, we would just rename them all at once using the /, naming convention, and then use the generate style to generate generate them all as a bulk. So what I can do is just double click that and then just write color renamed and then cut that. I can go back to the starter page and then add that next to this one so you can have that for your reference. So this way you have the renamed version for your reference. Step 6. So now if I go back to my components page, I can finally start creating the buttons. And the first thing that I need to do is basically add a text on my canvas. The shortcut is T, and then as you can see, as soon as I click T, text is highlighted for me, so I can zoom in, click anywhere, and then just type in link. I'll click outside, hold Shift and A to create an auto layout, and I would double click on that, rename this to link. Also from the auto layout panel, I would give it 12 pixels of padding on left and right, and as well as 8 pixels of padding on top and bottom. And in terms of the border radius, I would go to the appearance and then just give it 4 pixels. You might not see any difference. The reason is we haven't given it a background color. The way you would give it a background color is we would go to our fill, click on that 4 dots, and now we can select colors from our primary color palette. So we would select the 5, and then if we click on the link here, we would select the 100%, which is white. And now if I zoom in, I have my primary link created. What I need to do is create a component out of this. So I would click on that. I would scroll all the way up. Here you see that we have the create component icon. You can always search for that as well. So you can just hold command and / search for create component. And then once you do that, you see the icon is changed. We have our component created. What we need to do is add a text property. The reason we add a text property, it allows us to edit our text when we select our button, which means if I hold option and drag this button out, we have an instance right now. We can tell that this is an instance because if we take a look at the left hand side, the icons are different. And if we take a look at the right hand side, we see we can't change the text. It would be nice if we select the actual link and have the ability to change the text property right from the panel. Step 7. So the way we would do that is we would select the link and select the text inside the link, and we would scroll to the typography section and select this tiny icon, and then here you see we have component property created. So we would rename this to label, and then for the value we would just give it a default value for now, and we would create the property. As soon as we create the property, here you see we have our text property created. So right now if I go back to my instance and select it, if I scroll up, you see we have a property called label, which means we can simply select that and start typing, for example, login. And then as soon as we do that, the actual button would change. Previously, we didn't have this option. Because we created a text property, now we can have the ability to edit the value of the button. Also, we need to create another secondary button. Now we would click on our link, and then as you can see here, we have a different icon, which is called add a variant. If we click on that, Figma creates a variant for us. We can give this variant a background color so we can see it clearly. We can go to the fill section, select the variant, and then just add plus to give it a background color so we can see it better. And if we click the variant and then if we scroll up, Figma gave it a default property. So in order for us to switch between different styles, we have to give it a property name. For example, here we can double click on it, give it a property of color, and then for the value we can give the first one a value of black and the second one a value of white. And then all we have to do right now is go to the second button, which has the value of white, and change the background color. So we visit the fill section, we change the background color from 5 to 94, and then the text color from 100% to 5. This way we flip the colors. And now if I go ahead and select my button and scroll up, here you see we have color, which is called black and white. And as soon as I switch between them, we have the ability to switch between our links. If you have only 2 values in your variant, what you can do is use true and false values, which means I can click on my first button, and instead of actually having it as black, I would just rename this to true. And I would go on my other one, which is white, and I would rename this to false. And if I go ahead and click on my instance, right now you see I have a toggle, which means I can actually switch between white and black using a custom toggle that I just created. On top of that, I have the ability to change the value and change it at the same time. Since we changed this to toggle, it doesn't make sense to have the property name as color. For example, if the toggle is on, the link is actually turned into black, which means if I go to the link component, I can double click on the color and then rename this to black. As soon as the toggle is set to true, the black color appears. As soon as it's set to false, it switches back to the white. So I can click on that, and then here we see we have black, so we can switch and turn off the black color, and now we're back at the white color. Step 8. Since we have our button created, all we have to do is basically replicate that and replace the text values using the newly created component. So I'll click and drag this, and I need to basically duplicate this multiple times. I can duplicate this by using the Command D shortcut, but at first I would just select that, Shift and A to create an auto layout, rename this to nav, and then I would set the direction from vertical to horizontal, and then in the fill section I would just basically give it a background color of white, which is gray 100. As soon as I select that, here we have our navigation created. And then as you can see, our first button has a bit of a contrast between the background color and the navigation. So what I can do is basically click and drag this. But what you notice is our button is actually being stretched and we don't want that behavior. So what I have to do is basically group the button into two different groups, which means the product, teams, individuals, download and pricing. These would be one group. Demo, login, and get Notion for free, there will be another group. And then finally we have the logo. So let's just go ahead and do that. And in order for us to not confuse these two, I can double click and then just rename this to the wireframe. So we know that this is the wireframe and this is the navigation. And then here on the left hand side, we have the navigation and then we have the instance, which is the link. I can click on that, Shift and A to create another auto layout. And then I can double click, rename this to right. And I also want to make sure that the direction is set to horizontal. Now, if I go ahead and select the auto layout, I want to have this as hug. Also, if I go to my button, I would select that. And instead of fill, I would have this as hug as well. Right now, we managed to fix that issue. So all we need to do is basically select the instance, Command and D, and duplicate that 3 times. And that would be the 3 links that we have on the right hand side. Since we renamed this to the right, now we would select the right side, Command and D to duplicate that, double click, rename this to left. And then as you can see, we have 5 links. So we would select the link, Command and D 2 times. So we have 5 links. And then finally, we would have the Notion logo. So we would select the Notion logo, Command and C to copy that. We would select our navigation, Command and V to paste that, and then we can double click and rename this to logo. And if I zoom outside and if I try to bring the navigation here, as you can see on the left hand side, we have a navigation, which is an auto layout. We have left and right side, again, 2 more auto layouts. And then we have our logo. Since everything is in auto layout, I can use the arrow to move the logo all the way to the left side and then click on the navigation and drag it all the way. And what I also want is the right navigation to take all the available space and be pushed all the way to the right side. Step 9. In order to fix that, what you need to do is select the parent navigation, and then instead of having the gap as 10, you would select the drop down and have the gap as auto. As soon as we select the auto, here you see that the right side is actually pushed all the way to the edge. The left side is actually placed in the middle, and then the logo is placed all the way to the left side. And then if we click on the navigation here, you see we managed to create a responsive layout. However, we don't want the middle navigation to be always in the middle. Since we renamed this to left, we want this to be close to the Notion, and we only want the right side to be pushed all the way to the right. So in order to fix that, what we need to do is nest auto layout one more time, which means we have to select the left and the logo, create another auto layout, and then here double click, rename this to logo plus left, and then give it a gap of 16, for example. By doing that, we have now a navigation, logo and the left side. And if we open logo and the left side, we have the logo and the left, which is another auto layout, and then we have the right side. If we zoom out, we see that we have our right side as well. So what we can do is resize this, and as you can see, only the right side is being resized proportionately. We only want one of the buttons to be primary, so what I can do is double click on one of the links here and then only turn this into black, and we want the text, basically get Notion for free, to be pasted there. So I would just Command and C to copy that and then select this one. And instead of sign up, I would just paste get Notion for free. And then as you can see, this is how we are managing to update our links. So what I have to do is copy paste these values one by one into the buttons. So we have our navigation created. Step 10. What you can do is use a plugin to copy the values and select all these buttons and paste them all at once. A plugin that I'm going to use is called ManyPaster. So here I would search for ManyPaster and then I would open this. What I would do is basically zoom in, select the product teams, and then copy it from the selection. And then here you see that it actually copied everything for me. Now what I have to do is basically select the left side, select all the links within that, press return on my keyboard to select all the individual text, and then click paste data. As soon as I click paste data, here you see all the data is actually being pasted all at once. So I can hide everything on the UI. We managed to create this navigation bar out of our wireframe. And if I go ahead and visit the starter page, here we managed to basically finish the navigation. The next sections that we need to focus on is basically the hero. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more design tips and tutorials, and let me know what you think in the comments down below.